Sections 8 and 9 of Sree Krishna, the Lord of Love, by Baba Premanand Bharati. Section 8. The Four Stages of Life. Simultaneously with the introduction of the caste system in the Silver Age, are instituted the four stages of life, the object of which is to help the lower state of human consciousness to gradually attain to the highest spiritual realization. They are graduated processes of mental and physical application and discipline, by the practice of which individuals are to recover the absolute illumination, being, and bliss enjoyed by all human souls in the Golden Age. They impart a scientific training to the human mind in order to enable it to subdue its rajasic active and tamasic darkening attributes by developing the sattvic illuminating attribute through concentration upon the basic principles of life, the center and essence of absolute purity and illumination. The first stage is called brahmacharya, or spiritual pupillage. The second stage is called grihastha, or householdership. The third stage is called vanaprastha, or asceticism. The fourth stage is called the bhikshu, or wandering friarship. The first, third, and fourth stages are enjoined for the three twice-born castes, and the third and fourth are open even to a Sudra, if he is found worthy of adopting them. The Brahman, Kshatriya, and Vaishya are called twice-born. The first birth is the physical birth. The second is the spiritual birth through the investiture of the holy thread from which begins the performance of daily spiritual duties and practices. The first stage of life begins soon after this spiritual initiation, at the age of 12, when the boy goes to reside with the Guru, spiritual guide, for studying the Veda and for undergoing spiritual, mental, and physical discipline. The Guru is an illuminated Brahmin sage whose love and affection for the pupils in his charge, and anxious care and efforts for the unfoldment of their souls, are not equaled by those of even their parents. He feeds, clothes, and lodges them in his own abode, free of any charge or consideration whatever. His one thought and concern is to help them to realize the truth, to be freed from the bondage of matter, and thus enter the absolute realm of eternal love and happiness. While every student has to perform the same regular spiritual rites and practices, and to say the prayers daily after physical purification, the method of training adopted by the Guru for developing their soul is not the same in each case. To some he explains the truths of the Veda and asks them to meditate on their meanings. Others, who show natural instincts of devotion, he trains into practical realization of the same truths without teaching them a single word of the Veda. The chief method of a guru's teaching is to draw the student's mind away from worldly attractions and turn the direction of the mind's vision inwards into the soul. Devotion is the principal aim, for devotion means concentration, and when that concentration is fixed upon the contemplation of the essence of things, which pervades them all, and yet is unmixed with the outer substance, attributes of their manifested forms, the mind absorbs the perfect purity of that essence, and is filled with the serenity and the inexpressible joy born of absolute freedom from the influence of matter. If the student obtains this practical realization of the essence of existence, he remains for the rest of his life in this stage of spiritual pupillage. But he is no more a pupil. He becomes a teacher of pupils, a guru. It is this practical realization that invests a student of wisdom with the magnetic power of awakening that realization in others. A spiritual student's training is essentially based upon a life of purest mental and physical chastity. The student is not allowed by the teacher to mix or talk with worldly men, or to discuss temporal subjects among themselves. When the practical realization of the truth is attained, life's one object is attained. If, however, after staying and studying with the Guru for 12 years, the student fails to have this practical grasp of the soul of wisdom, he leaves the Guru, and with his permission returns to his family, takes unto himself a good-tempered, virtuous, and spiritually inclined wife, and enters into the life of a householder. But the principal object of this second stage of life is the same as in the first, realization of the truth. The practice for physical and mental purity is continued. The Veda is studied daily, diligently, and devotedly, and the meanings of its truths and principles contemplated with calmness and concentration, comparing their lessons in the light of the experiences of worldly life. The obligations of household life are greater than those of pupilage. Life must be sustained on simple and sparing meals. The means of living must be honestly earned. The hungry or needy beggar must be satisfied according to means and ability. The pleasures and comforts of household existence must be enjoyed moderately and with discrimination. Parents, wife, members of the family, poor relatives and dependents, and devoted servants must be supported, loved, and made happy. All legitimate wishes and wants of the wife must be satisfied. She must be cherished with affection and respect, and regarded as the presiding deity of household harmony. If during this household life the truth is realized, the householder remains at home during the rest of his earthly days. He has no need to go into the third stage of life, for as I have said, realization of the truth is the end and aim of life in all its stages. If, however, this main object is not obtained, the householder, after 24 years of family life, must enter the third stage, that of the ascetic. He must leave his home with his wife, and retire from worldly life and interests, and live in some secluded forest place near his home, and practice austerities, physical and mental, in order to purge the mind of all its material inclinations for a period of 12 years. If during that time the realization is obtained, he remains in that stage for the rest of his life, imparting the realized knowledge and wisdom to all who may come to him. If, however, he fails in his search for it, even in this ascetic stage, he returns to his home with his wife, and if he has a son to protect and support her, he leaves his home and family with the permission of his parents and his wife, and enters into the fourth stage, that of the holy wanderer, to tread the path to freedom and truth all alone, sundering all ties of worldly life and surrendering himself, body, mind, and soul, to that search. He must not occupy his mind with any other but that one thought. He must live on one simple spare meal a day, enough to sufficiently satisfy his hunger. He must dress himself in scant, saffron-colored clothes, the color of love and wisdom. He must ever be wandering, never entering a human home, and rest under trees, but must not sleep under one tree or on the same spot or place for 3 successive nights. Never talk with people on any other subject than that of his search, and discuss it with humble spirit of inquiry with the illuminated sages he comes across on his journeyings. This all-absorbing meditation does help to awaken in him at last the light of the truth, and blessed with that light he is filled with joy, and feels himself the happiest mortal, in touch and tune with the purest spirit of the universe, the infinity, which is the parent of the finite. With the first flush of this realization, he changes the color of his clothes from saffron to white, the color of illumination, sattva, and as he wanders still in the ecstasy of the bliss of truth within his soul, gradually the objective phenomena around him seem unsubstantial and finally grow dim and shadowy, while the realized spirit in which his mind lives immersed, he perceives to be the only substance of those shadows. Then, as he roams along laughing and sporting like a little boy in the fullness of the glee within. He becomes in time almost unconscious of anything outside of his soul. His very sight is a blessing to all beholders, a blessing which fills them temporarily with the delight of his intoxication. He has no count of time or notion of the phases of time, whether it is morning, noon, or night. He lives henceforth in infinity, and views all nature as dwelling within him, and anon views himself as a wavelet in the infinite ocean of its essence. He does not feel any hunger for with the satisfaction of his spiritual hunger. All hunger has been satisfied forever. He is the embodiment of ecstasy, uncovered ecstasy, and even his physical cover, the white cloth, has fallen from his body. He stands naked as naked, nature's most natural man. He is clothed with the illumination of his soul, like the golden age man. Section 9. The Copper Age. The divine cycle of time can be likened to a fruit. Like the ripening and rottening of a fruit, the divine cycle develops and degenerates into rottenness. The golden age is its ripening stage. At the end of that age it is fully ripe. The silver age is its overripe stage. The copper age marks the stage of its rottenness, and the iron age is its fully rotten stage. At the end of the iron age it is reduced to its seed, out of which springs the sprout of the golden age. And during the junction period of the golden age, covering 144,000 human years, the sprout grows into a flowering tree which bears fruit with the commencement of the golden age proper. The length of the copper age is 2,000 divine years, equal to 720,000 human years, while its twilight periods are 72,000 years each. Men in this age are 7 cubits or 10.5 feet high. Virtue lives in it in 2 quarters, the other 2 being filled by vice. Vitality is rooted in the blood. Men live as long as there is blood in their body. Gold and silver leaving become dearer. The metal generally used in making household utensils is copper, which is found abundantly, whence the age derives its name. The intensity of accelerated raja within nature helps the assertion of tama in all her manifest phases. Although sattva still has some influence, the trees become less in height, less fruitful, and the fruits less sweet, crops less abundant despite the best efforts of cultivation. Cows give less milk than in the silver age, while wild animals become more ferocious. Most animals can speak in the silver age, but now only some of them, the higher ones, are blessed with that power during the major portion of it. People in the copper age become more and more outward-looking generally, especially the Sudras, some of whom, having become filled with dense tama, revolt against all laws and discipline and turn into thieves and robbers. These latter are expelled from their caste and banished out of civilized centers of population the world over by the kings. They are called by the common name of robbers and specific names of Yavans and Melekas, which means men who are wild, barbarous, unclean by nature and habits. These Yavans and Alekas come into existence towards the end of the Silver Age and rapidly increase in number during the Dwapar Copper Age, towards the end of which they form the majority of the world's population and are known by different names according to the localities of their habitation, different shades of their dark attributes, and the callings they pursue. Yavan, Karat, hunters; Grandar, Jin, Chinese; Shabar, barber, barbarian; Shak, Tungar, conqueror; Palhab, Ramat, and Kamboj. The kings in the Copper Age have a hard time to protect their subjects and their territories from the depredations of these wild characters and robbers. The king's first duty is to preserve peace in his kingdom, so that his subjects may not be disturbed in the performance of their religious duties, may apply themselves to the study of the Veda and the contemplation of the supreme deity, and tread the path of virtue without annoyance. The king's chief duty being to ensure the material welfare of his subjects with the sole view of helping their spiritual welfare, the punishment for their infringement of caste and religious rules is made severe and swiftly administered. At the same time, the spirit of the times is taken into consideration, and many rigid rules are relaxed, and minor faults are pardoned. The 4 castes are subdivided into subcastes according to the different callings that the Vaishyas and Sudras show preference in their inclinations to follow. Those who take to agriculture are classed as cultivators. Those who rear cattle and sell milk and butter are called milkmen, while those who take to trade and commerce are called traders and merchants, and so on. All these form into different subcastes under the general caste of Vaishya. Similarly, the Sudras are subdivided according to their respective callings, viz., blacksmiths, potters, carpenters, masons, etc., all under the general caste of Sudra. The chief object of these subcastes is to save human society from disintegration as much as possible, to preserve the masses of men in as large coherent sections as practicable, linked to one another through spiritual, moral, and material relations. Another and almost equally important object of the caste and subcaste systems in the Copper Age is to conserve the heredity of their different intellectualities, talents, healthy characteristics, and instincts. This becomes all the more necessary owing to the fact that it is in the Dwapar Yuga that husbands and wives begin to have carnal relations. During the Golden Age and the greater portion of the Silver Age, all men and women are what Christians call virgin-born. The fuss that is made about this immaculate conception succeeds only to excite a smile of pity in the Shastra enlightened Hindu, a smile of pity for the ignorance of the facts in the past history of the human race, of which they seem to know so little and care less to know more. This fact about the Golden and Silver Ages, this generally prevailing immaculate child conception, ought to open their eyes. If they require any authority for this statement, I refer them to the study of the Shanti Parva of the Mahabharata. The yoga power of the Golden Age men draw disembodied souls from the Bhuba sphere and spiritual souls from higher spheres to enter into a woman's womb and be born on the earth plane. The will force of these men supplies these incoming souls with the material of a physical body. In the Silver Age, the higher illuminated Brahmins and saints can bring about conception in the same way, while others bring it about by making the women eat magnetized charu, which not only draws these spirits to the womb, but supplies the material for the physical body. In the Copper Age, however, the decrease of spirituality takes away the power, and so the material of the physical body has to be supplied by the physical vigor of the father and the blood of the mother to enable a disembodied spirit to enter the womb and grow into a child. This degenerated process of procreation coming into vogue in the Copper Age renders it necessary to fuse higher magnetism into the lower castes, as well as to preserve the magnetism of each caste from deterioration. The means adapted for securing these ends is to allow the 2 higher caste men to marry girls of the lower castes, and towards the latter end of the Copper Age, even Vaishyas are permitted to marry Sudra girls. The lower caste men, however, are never allowed to marry higher caste women, as it degenerates the breed, the seed being a far more potent factor in producing excellence of growth than the soil. The offsprings of these intermarriages form into castes distinct from those of their fathers and mothers, lower than their fathers and higher than their mothers. In order to preserve the magnetism and the hereditary talent and instincts from deteriorating, the castes are divided into subcastes according to their general proclivities and professions of livelihood. Each subcaste must marry within its own circle and must eat food cooked by the hands of its own members. Heredity is now being believed in by the materialistic people of the modern world, and when that belief in heredity will have grown stronger in their minds, they will then take practical measures to preserve the good qualities of heredity from being spoilt by coming in contact with the bad magnetism of its lower traits. This human magnetism is a subject which is worthy of the study of modern scientists, if they can find out what it is, ascertain its properties, power for good and evil, and how good magnetism can be conserved and transmitted, and how bad magnetism can be purified. They will do humanity greater good than they have done by the discovery of steam and electricity, which, judged from the standpoint of the highest good, ought to be considered as very doubtful boons. Magnetism is not useful magnetism if it is purely physical. It is not worth preserving. It is injurious, and its contact ought to be avoided. It is spiritual magnetism which is worth preserving. It is spirituality which is the medium which transmits good heredity from parent to progeny. The mind is the storehouse and battery of all human magnetism. The vibrations of the mind pervade every atom of the body, and the mind's vibrations are generated by its principal and most powerful thoughts and sentiments. These vibrations are the essence of these thoughts and sentiments, and magnetism is that subtle essence impregnated with the potencies of the mind, mixed with the subtle forces of the physical body. Marrying, cooking, and eating within the caste helps to conserve in the individual members thereof the spiritual and mental magnetism generated by the performances of the religious duties and ceremonies and spiritual incantations which form the daily routine of household life enjoined by the scriptures. Thus wisdom, talent, traits, instincts are all ingrained in and transmitted through the blood from generation to generation of each caste. The caste is like a university, each home a school, and the instincts and talents brought into being with the birth of each member are the implanted principles of the knowledge of each profession of which it is the caste. A carpenter's caste is a guild for carpentry. A carpenter's home is a technical school for carpentry, where the natural talent and love for the art are partly imbibed by the instincts of heredity and partly by observation, which is the best system of training. With these tendencies of material arts are born in the blood of the child the germs of the moral and spiritual culture of the parents. These germs shoot forth into healthy growth under the fostering care of the child's guardians, aided by the religious, social, and domestic duties the growing child has to perform daily. The carpenter is as much a useful member of the four-caste society as the Brahmin. The householder Brahmin can no more do without a carpenter than a carpenter can do without a Brahmin, but the value of the Brahmin's help to the carpenter being more important to the development of his soul, which is the true aim and goal of earthly life, the obligations of the other castes to the Brahmin are greater and deeper than those of the Brahmin to the Sudra. The question may now be asked, has that carpenter no chance of becoming the equal of the Brahmin through spiritual culture? Yes and no. Yes, because Brahmanhood is nobody's monopoly. Brahmanhood is but a state of the human mind, the ensouled state of the human mind, and anybody who develops this state of mind, even though he be encased within a pariah's flesh, lays legitimate claim to Brahmanhood. Only he must make that ensouled mental state perfect. Only he must enter the fold of Brahmanhood through the door of nature, through the ingress of rebirth. The maturity of a material or mental condition is best known to nature. A mass of animal flesh lying on the surface of Mother Earth undergoes all the processes of disintegration and putrefaction, and when that disintegration is complete, Earth assimilates and absorbs it again. It becomes a part of her body. It becomes Earth itself. What is true of material plane of nature is true as well of her mental and spiritual planes. When a carpenter has developed full Brahman consciousness, nature opens to him wide the portals of the spiritual caste, which had looked down upon him in his carpenter birth. Even in his carpenter birth, he does not go unrewarded. The case of the carpenter Rishi called Sudha is a luminous instance in point. His spiritual culture was so great that the highest illuminated sages, rishis, learned from him the lessons of the Puranas, which he preached to them, sitting on a raised platform with their reverential permission. He was considered a knower of Brahm, and so enjoyed the respect paid to the highest spiritual beings. A Sudra may not become a Brahmin, but may become, through practical spiritual culture, a higher being than a Brahmin, even in his Sudra birth, and be born into a highly spiritual Brahmin family by a sheer dint of merit, the merit of developing spiritual consciousness in the next birth. Similarly, a Brahmin born in the highest family of his clan will, by developing pariah qualities, be outclassed in his Brahmin birth and enter through the door of nature into a pariah family in a subsequent birth. The above facts and truths are known to a child even of every caste. Even a child knows, either in the Copper Age or today among the four caste people, that a caste birth is dependent upon karma, actions. A Sudra, therefore, takes the very fact of his birth as sufficient reason for his being placed in the lowest caste. He is reconciled to his fate, a fate with the potentialities of his actions in previous existences, and the little gloom of sadness that his lowly station of life casts upon his mind is illumined now and again by the silver lining of the consolation that it is in his power, if he so wills it, to be a high Brahmin in the next incarnation, if he succeeds in developing his higher soul consciousness. The Veda in the Copper Age has for the first time to be studied, and its truths practiced in two parts, the philosophical and the ceremonial parts. Men generally are degenerated so much in this age that they can no longer grasp the truths of the Upanishads without first purifying their body, and through the purified body, the mind. The Vedas are divided into Upanishads, eternal spiritual truths, and the mantras, incantations, hymns, and ceremonies, the practice of which cleanses the impurities of the mind and body. In the Dwapar Yuga, therefore, the performance of the ceremonies of the Veda is much in vogue. When the body and mind are purified, they are made fit for grasping the meanings of the higher philosophy of life, and become receptive to the influences of the subtlest spiritual vibrations. End of section 9. Sections 10 and 11 of Sree Krishna, the Lord of Love, by Baba Premanand Bharati. Section 10. The Iron Age. But even these attempts and safeguards for keeping up the higher individuality of the human race fail to retard the course of the degeneration which nature herself undergoes in the process of time. The fruit of divine cycle, spoken of in the beginning of the last section, reaches an advanced stage of rottenness, which marks the commencement of the twilight period of the Kali, called also Tamas or the Dark Age. The characteristics of Kali are symptoms of nature filled with denser gloom than heretofore. The usual Kali, the last section of every divine cycle, is much more dense with Tama, darkness, than the one in which we are living now. The reason is that at the junction of the last Dwapar and the present Kali, the fullest incarnation of the supreme deity, Sree Krishna, himself came on earth to dwell among men for a period of 100 years. This avatar and source of all avatars, this central form point of all pervading Brahm, this embodiment of Parabrahm, is gracious enough to come and dwell among men on earth only once in 71 divine cycles. We, the degenerated mortals of this dark age, are more fortunate than even humanity of many a golden or silver age. The Supreme Lord sanctifies the soil of the earth plane of every universe with the all-purifying touch of his lotus feet by turns. The countless universes that spring out of him and return in germ form again into him have the grace of his personal touch and supervision at appointed times. When Krishna comes to live in any of the universes, nature therein is turned inside out, so that the inmost essence of it may flow over its surface and wash off all the causes of pollution. It has been recorded by the contemporary sages of Krishna Leela, the all-knowing sages who came down to earth from higher planes to act as scribes of the Lord's deeds, that by the coming of Krishna, not only the 36,000 years forming the junction period of Kali was destroyed, but also almost half of the age of Kali proper, while the Lord's rash dance with the gopis absorbed a whole kalpa covering 36,000 divine cycles out of the age of Brahma. The age of Brahma is the age of the universe. That is to say, the age of Brahma is equal to the duration of creation. Brahma lives for 100 Brahmic years, and one Brahmic year is made up of 360 Brahmic days. One day of Brahma is equal to one kalpa, so is his night. A kalpa is equal to 12 billion divine years. One night of Brahma covers the same period of time, so that one day and one night of Brahma covers 24 billion divine years. Multiplying these figures by 360, we get 8,640,000,000 divine years, which is the span of 1 year of Brahma. Multiplying these figures by 100, we get the span of Brahma's age, 864 billion divine years, which being multiplied by 360, we get 311 trillion 40 billion human lunar years, the age of Brahma, the duration of creation. Thus the night of the Rash dance not only absorbed 1 kalka equal to 4,320,000,000 lunar years out of the duration of creation, but also 36,000 years, which form the junction of Dwapar and Kali, as also about half the span of the Kali proper. About this last there is no authoritative statement in the Shastras, but it has been stated therein that when Krishna left the earth and went up to his abode, the forces of advanced Kali overtook humanity. Now, according to the Hindu almanacs, about 5,000 years only have passed since Krishna's departure, which would mean that it is now but the beginning of Kali proper, the span of which is 360,000 years. But the signs and symptoms of the times already visible are unmistakably of the middle Kali, detailed descriptive features of which are to be found in the Mahabharata, as also in all the Puranas. This being so, it is not a wrong supposition that we are already in the middle Kali, and that Krishna Leela has also taken away half the age of Kali proper. Nor is it necessary that the Kali has to pass through the conventional figures of its duration given in the Shastras. What is true of individual humanity is true also of the whole mass of humanity, which represents Kali. Kali is nothing else but the forms of nature's changes of the latter end of a divine cycle. We, men and beasts, and trees and grass, productions of nature, represent the phases and features of Kali. Dense Tama, working within nature, brings out the characteristics of this dark age to the surface of the earth. Man, being the most highly organized product and the most powerful medium of her attributes, the thoughts and actions of men are most affected by it. The dark thoughts and actions called sin, in common parlance of humanity, form the sins of Kali, which represents the spirit of human conduct and characteristics in the dark age. We see that people who are naturally healthy and robust shorten their longevity by over-indulging in vice. Thus a life of vice or sin, that is, life lived in violation of nature's laws, begets diseases of the body which bring about early destruction. A man, for instance, who, according to his natural state of health, ought to live for 100 years, is often found to die at the age of 30, a victim of dissipated life. This rule applies to Kali. All our accumulated sins form Kali's sins, and these accumulated sins are begetting diseases in the body and mind of humanity, from which Kali must die an early death. This Kali, therefore, with its rapidly increasing accumulation of sin, may come to an end in less than 10,000 years, its conventional period of existence, 360,000 years, being condensed into that short space of time. Judging from the signs of an advanced state of rottenness already developed, it would seem as if the worst features which hasten its end may manifest themselves in less than a few hundred years. But like wheels within wheels, the Satya, Treta, and Dwapar cycles have their sway through its duration by turns. By this I mean that during the course of Kali, Iron Age, features and characteristics of the Golden, Silver, and Copper ages manifest themselves by turns all through it. Indeed, the spirit and attributes of these 4 cycles weigh the moral and physical atmosphere of each day and night. Supposing the average day begin at 6 a.m., the influence and the attributes of the Golden Age prevail from 6 a.m. to 3:36 p.m. Those of the Silver Age prevail from 3:36 p.m. to 10:48 p.m. those of the Copper Age from 10:48 p.m. to 3:36 a.m., and those of the Iron Age from 3:36 a.m. to 6 a.m. Illumination and comparative calmness dwell within and without us from morning tip to high noon, owing to the predominance of sattva, the predominant attribute of the Golden Age. From noon, activity, raja, asserts itself, and by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon it gains full force, when light, inside and out of us, is on the decline, and calmness is disturbed, introducing the influence of the Silver Age, which lasts until about 11 at night, when Tama, darkness, begins its reign, and, combined with Raja, holds the rule of the Copper Age. The signs of Tama are laziness, inaction, sleep, etc. We begin to experience these from 12 o'clock at night until 3 in the morning. Slumber and gloom envelop us in nature, but sleep and darkness are deepest from 3 to 5 in the morning. These hours are ruled by Kali, the Dark Age. Thus cycles revolve within cycles as they revolve, even within the smallest cycle, called throughout the Iron Age. The conditions of the first 3 cycles prevail one after the other, and when this influence of the Copper Age conditions in the Kali Age spends itself, conditions of darker Kali prevail for a time. Then again signs are visible of Golden Age influence, and after a time degenerate into Silver Age phases, then into Copper Age mixed light, then again into the deep gloom of Kali within Kali, and so on. As Kali advances more and more, the successive rotatory influences of the other 3 cycles become feebler and feebler, and at last, under the deepest gloom of Kali, gaining fullest power, their influences are kept down absolutely. Here begins the end of the Kali period. Soon after, the signs of the coming Golden Age are visible. These ever-recurring conditions of the Golden and Silver Ages, though feeble in their influence, counteract the destructive influences of vice and sin, and thus help to save the life of Kali from coming to an end all too soon. The Kali Yuga is called the Iron Age because gold, silver, and copper becoming scarcer, people use all sorts of mixed metals, but chiefly iron, in making household utensils, iron being found in great abundance. The average stature of mankind is 3.5 cubits, or 5 feet 9 inches. Virtue is reduced to 1/4, the other 3/4 being made up by vice. With the decrease of spirituality, ill every succeeding age, the root of vitality has been transferred from marrow to bone, from bone to blood. Now, in the Kali, that root of life is destroyed. Life in this age is generally sustained by food alone. The effect of constant concentration upon changeful external objects rebounds upon the body, causing loss of tissue greater than that in the former ages, which men still have their mind turned inwards between the whiles, to have a dip in the source of all life, the soul. The Vedas in the Iron Age are no more understandable to the people in their original sound embodiments, except to a small portion of spiritual Brahmins. They are therefore presented to the people in general in the form of Shastras and Puranas. These embody the Vedic truths, principles, and ideas in easy constructions and simple language, illustrated by examples and stories drawn from facts in life of the past ages. The Shastras are therefore nothing but the Vedas, simplified, explained, and illustrated, with the object of enabling the deteriorated intellect of the Iron Age man to grasp the light and the spirit of the storehouse of revealed wisdom. The ceremonial parts of the Vedas are likewise modified and rendered easier for practice in the form of smitris, forms of spiritual duties and sacrifices, the daily performance of which is enjoined upon the 4 caste people. Yet for all that, despite all these strenuous efforts of the small spiritual portion of the people to save the souls of their brethren from succumbing to the dark forces of the age and the allurements of a material life of indisciplined liberty and license, human society falls into a mental and material state of chaos, typical of the stage of complete rottenness of a fruit. As many grains of wheat, when ground in a mill, look like one substance called flour, which means so many separate grains of wheat have been divided into such minute parts that they appear as one substance, so in this most advanced stage of decomposition of human society, its various and separate composing parts and phases, religious, racial, and material, will be divided into one whole-looking mass of separate minute units. People's minds at this latter end of the age will be so far removed from the idea and notion of God and the soul that the Vedas, the Bible, and all other religious books and philosophies that are now extant will disappear, and even the fact that they had at any time existed will be completely forgotten. Churches and temples, mosques and synagogues will no more be seen on the face of the earth. Humanity will live for life itself, the grossest material life. Each individual will differ from the other on all imaginable points of view, on all subjects. Every man and woman will be his or her own God or ideal. There will be no sympathy between them, each one asserting his or her independence over all of his or her fellow creatures. They will think, act, move, eat, sleep, as their own wild, willful dispositions will prompt, causing quarrels and fighting between another. Selfishness and aggression will be the keynote of their character. The number of Malekhas and Yavans and outcasted people increases out of all proportion to the number of the forecast people who may now be called the root race of the earth. In the process of time, this root race of people will cling round the center of the earth to save their spiritual instincts, pure ways of living, customs, and habits from being contaminated by association with the strayed portion of humanity who now form the greatest majority. As when in the throes of death through disease, the only visible action of life is centered in the heart, while all other parts are numb and comparatively lifeless, so with the advance of Kali, the spiritual life becomes centered in the heart of the earth. This heart of the earth is called in the ancient scriptures the sea-girt isle or peninsula, the belt of the earth's body, now called India. In this heart only of the earth live the original forecast people, while the rest, broken away and divorced from the parent stock and religion, are scattered all over the rest of her body. The signs of advanced Kali are already visible all over the earth at the present moment, nay, even of its most degenerated stage, especially in the West, signs and symptoms which are manifesting themselves here and there, even in men of the root race. What a horrid state of affairs the closing period of Kali will bring about may be judged from the prophecies made 5,000 years ago by the illuminated sages of this root race, prophecies which are correct in startling exactitude, and some of which are on all fours with the signs and characteristics of our present period, as will be seen from a few extracts from them given below. The conditions of the different stages of Kali have been described in all the 18 Puranas and the Mahabharata, which embody the history of the human race from creation to destruction, the past, present, and future phases of human society of all times and of all climes. The following few details translated from a minute description of the early, middle, and final stages of the Kali given by the Markandeya in reply to questions put into Kali by King Yudhisthira in an assemblage of saints, kings, and nobles, inspired by incarnated Krishna, who was present in person, will be of interest to most of my readers. Raja Yudhisthira, Emperor of Bharat Varsha, the central of the 7 continents of the ancient world, now known as all the world, during his sojourn among the rishis, saints of Kamyak forest, with a view to ascertain the future state of the world, asked the immortal saint Brahmarshi Markandeya, Holy One, after having heard your wonderful accounts of the creation and the destruction of the universe, we have become anxious to hear about Kali Yuga, and we beg you to describe this age in detail to us. What results will be produced by the destruction of the root religion? What will the valor, strength, food, behavior, costume, and longevity of the human race be like? And how long after will commence the Satya Yuga, golden age, again? Saint Markandeya answered, O king, in the Satya Yuga, virtue being void of the least touch of greed, deception, and other evil qualities of the mind, was like a full 4-footed bull. In the Treta it lost 1, and in the Dwapar 2 feet. In the Dark Age it will be only 1-footed, the other 3 feet being destroyed by vice. The longevity, heroism, intelligence, strength, and mind force of mankind are gradually decreasing age by age. They will decrease still more in the Kali. The kings, Brahmins, Vaishyas, and Sudras will practice false piety, and this false piety will be turned into a means for cheating others. Love of truth will decline in men. Decline in love of truth will cause shortness of life. Shortness of life will prevent the proper cultivation of wisdom. Little wisdom will beget ignorance. Ignorance will beget greed. Greed, anger. Anger, delusion. And swayed by greed, anger, delusion, and sensuality, they will be envious of and antagonistic to each other. The twice-born castes will become void of truth and holy meditation. The mean chandals, pariahs, will behave like kshatriyas, and kshatriyas will imitate the ways of the chandals. Husbands will become extremely henpecked, feed upon fish, flesh, and milk of goat and sheep. Man will aggress upon and develop an irreligious, atheistic, and thievish nature. People will not discriminate about the eatableness or uneatableness of any food. Brahmins will cease performing spiritual practices, will denounce the Vedas, and being deluded by false discussion, give up holy ceremonials and engage themselves in mean actions. Father and son will feel no compunction in killing each other, but will rather feel delighted at the deed and call it an act of God. The whole world will become maleka, unclean and barbarous, void of religious performances and ceremonials, gladness and festivities. Almost all people will be miserly, defame their friends and defraud and steal the money of poor, unprotected widows. They will possess little strength and no energy, yet be greedy and filled with material, sensual attachments, will gladly listen to the advices of well-known bad persons, and accept charity by false pretenses. Conceited, yet illiterate kings will challenge one another to fight, will try to kill one another, and will be like thorns in the sides of their subjects, setting at naught their duties of protecting the people. They will, swayed by greed and pride, be ever anxious to rob and punish them, and prompted by their cruel heart, they will snatch away the property and wives of honest and pious men. None will ask a father for his daughter to marry, and no father will offer his daughter in marriage. The daughters will choose and marry their own choice without consulting anybody or going through any ceremonials. Brother will cheat brother. Even learned persons will lose love of truth and be addicted to telling lies. The old will act like boys, boys like old people. Cowards will brag of their bravery, and brave men will act like cowards. All will eat the same kinds of food and be filled with selfishness and delusion. No one will trust another. Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas will cease to restrain and rule the Sudras or even each other. All castes will be leveled and become one, unclean and barbarous. Fathers will not pardon sons, nor sons pardon their fathers. Wives will cease from attending upon their husbands. Men and women will all be self-willed and envious of each other. People will not perform any good works or ceremonies to satisfy the gods. They will not listen to each other. There will be no guru, teacher, or chela, pupil. All will be filled with the darkness of ignorance. At Kali end, their longevity will be 16 years. Most will die immediately after that age is reached. Women will give birth to children at the age of 7 or 8, and in some cases even at 5 or 6. Men will beget children at the age of 10 or 12, in some cases even at the age of 7 or 8. No husband will be satisfied with his wife, no wife satisfied with her husband. They will have very little wealth, and even those who will have no wealth whatever will wear the false marks of wealth. Envy will be predominant in every mind, hunger ever burning in every stomach. Crossroad and streets will be thronged by wantons and libertines. Women, forsaking shame, will bear spite and grudge for their husbands. Men will be all of unclean habits, manners, and customs, eat anything and everything, and will be terrible in every way and action. They will cheat all in buying and selling of goods out of sheer greed. None will care to acquire spiritual wisdom, yet all will be busied in performing spiritual ceremonies for form's sake, and be naturally addicted to crooked acts. They will show the faults of each other. People will live in constant fear of losing their lives as victims of their own greed and envy. The Sudras will kill Brahmins and rob them of their property, and the Brahmins, being thus oppressed, will cry out in agony and out of fear will roam unprotected on the surface of the earth. Some of them will take refuge in lonely spots on river banks, in mountains, and in dangerous places to save their lives. Others, being oppressed by the grinding taxes of unjust kings, will lose all patience, and taking to the services of Sudras, will perform forbidden acts. The generality of people will become fierce and of murderous propensities. The Sudras will become spiritual preceptors, and Brahmins will listen to them, believing their wrong precepts to be demonstrated facts. The low will be high, and the high low. All conditions will be reversed. All people will forsake God and worship mammon. The Sudras will cease from serving Brahmins. The earth will no longer be adorned by the temples of God. All mankind will be impious and develop frightful characters. Meat will be their food, liquor their drink. The one object of life will be to increase flesh and blood. The rain clouds towards the close of Kali will pour down rains out of season, so that, overwhelmed by incessant and untimely rain, people will subsist on fruit and roots. Pupils will not care for the lessons of their teachers, temporal or other, and will act against their wishes. The poverty-stricken gurus, spiritual teachers, will curse their disciples. There will not be the least trace of respect left in the world. The relations of friends and kiths and kins will depend upon obligations of money. At the close of this cycle, flowers will grow upon flowers, fruits upon fruits, and owing to the rains not falling in season, there will grow but scanty crops, so that famine-stricken populations of the earth will cry out in hunger and roam upon her surface. Fragrant things will lose their odor, sweet juices will lose their sweetness, seeds will not germinate properly. Women will transfer their love from husbands to servants. All women, including wives of heroes, will prefer somebody else to their husbands for lovers. Pious men will be in mean stations, short-lived and poor. Vicious men will occupy high positions, have long life and prosperity. There will be constant breaking out of fires all over the land. Tired and hungry wayfarers will ask for food and refuge from householders in vain, and out of despair rest and sleep upon the road. Crows and other birds, snakes and beasts will make unearthly noises. When nature and human society will be thus revolutionized, reaction will naturally set ill. When the fruit of divine cycle will thus reach its extreme stage of rottenness, out of its seed will spring forth a shoot which will grow into a fresh tree. That tree in turn will bear fresh fruit, a fresh divine cycle. In this state of the darkest gloom, faint streaks of russet light will be visible, which will grow bright anon and give birth to the dawn of the golden age again. Reaction is the law of nature. Reaction is the result of every phase of action. When vice has its full run on the face of the globe, when it has reached its lowest depth and wildest reign, it spends its force, becomes weakened, allowing virtue to lift its head once more and build its palace of light upon its ruins. Vice is born of Tama, and virtue of Sattva, and the active force of both is Raja. Time is the self-manifesting kaleidoscopic revolution of color pictures on the transparent canvas of ether. After the deepest shades of dark colors are exhausted, there is a reaction of lighter colors. When Tama has exhausted its force, Sattva asserts itself by natural law. This healthy reaction, growing stronger, will gradually evolve some order out of the chaos of the closing Kali. A portion of the people will get disgusted with the reign of utmost license and inharmony, and endowed with strong mental force to resist the influence of the age, will pierce the veil of darkness, enveloping everything, and see the light that dwells within. These will stimulate this reaction and spread the discovered light among others groping in the darkness for that light. The forecast will be gradually established once more in some fashion. At this stage will be born, in the village of Sambalpur in India, a Brahmin of great spiritual force named Vishnujasha, and in time will become the father of the coming incarnation of Vishnu, one of the most powerful incarnations, Kalki. The Lord Kalki will rapidly grow into youth and spiritual power. At his mere mental call will come to him countless vehicles, armors, all kinds of weapons of war and soldiers. He will then lead them to battle against all the Malekas, robbers and tyrants all over the world, who will fall shouting in agony before his mammoth sword. After extirpating them all, the whole will establish once again perfect order and harmony on the surface of the earth. After ruling the world as emperor and infusing into humanity the spirit of highest spirituality, Kalki will make over the charge of the earth to the Brahmins and disappear after entering a most beautiful forest. Here will commence the junction period of coming golden age. During this period, covering 144,000 lunar years, all germs of vice, crime, and sin will be destroyed, and men will become engaged in spiritual practices and ceremonials. The earth will be adorned with beautiful forests and gardens, buildings, lakes, reservoirs, and temples of God, and many are the sacred ceremonies that will be constantly performed on her surface. Everywhere will be visible holy Brahmins, saints, and anchorites. The four stages of life, which before were filled with rogues, will now be filled by pious, honest, and truthful men. The deep-rooted bad instincts and associations will then be driven out of the minds of all people. All the crops will grow plentifully in their proper seasons. All people will be employed in charitable acts, religious sacrifices, and in performing spiritual duties. The Brahmins will again be absorbed in holy meditations, satisfied and serene. The Kshatriyas will exhibit their valor. The kings rule the world with justice and mercy. The Vaishyas carry on trade and agriculture. The Sudras serve the three upper castes with loving service. The purifying process of humanity will be carried on all through the 144,000 years, bringing about the highest spiritual, mental, and physical development. From the shortest stature to which the human body will be decreased, it will gradually, through this long process of time and culture, be increased once again to the height of 21 cubits, or 31.5 feet. With the height of the body will be reached the height of spiritual perfection. All men and women will once again enjoy the blessings of predominant sattva within nature, and roam upon the earth in the Garden of Eden, with their vision turned inwards into the soul of things, their body clad with the sky, their hearts filled with ecstasy, their thoughts centered upon God. We all who are now walking the earth have walked in the last golden age, and formed members of that godly fraternity of Adams and Eves, and shall do so in the coming golden age, unless we develop higher soul consciousness, and before the end of the present Kali transfer ourselves to any the upper four spheres, or to the highest beyond the universe, Kalaka, the abode of absolute love, to dwell with our only lover and beloved, Krishna. End of section 10. Section 11. Manvantara, or the deluge. The next larger cycle of time is called the Manvantara, or the deluge. When the divine cycle has revolved 71 times, it brings about a cataclysm. The oceans surge up and cover the entire earth with its waters, even the highest peaks of the Himalayas being submerged, and remain so for the period of 71 divine cycles. This worldwide natural catastrophe occurs periodically, owing to more and more increased accumulation of the sins of humanity, who along with all living beings and vegetation are thus destroyed by submersion. The only man saved is the most virtuous and spiritual man of the time, who becomes the Manu elect, that is, the spiritual governor of the next cycle, which extends between the time of the reappearance of land after the deluge to the next deluge. This period is called Manvantara, the period between two Manus. The account of the deluge, as given in the Old Testament of the Bible, has been taken from minute accounts recorded in the Alasya Fish Purana, and the condensed facts about them given in all the Puranas as well as the Mahabharata. Only the Bible version is distorted in some particulars. Since the beginning of the present Kalpa, creation's 6 Manvantaras, each ending with the deluge, have passed away. We are just now living in the 7th, of which 27 divine cycles have rolled away, and we are now living in the Iron Age of the 28th. Many millions of years, therefore, have gone by since the last flood. Towards the end of the Kali Yuga, of the last Manvantara, mankind became filled with the utmost corruption. But there was, according to the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Purana, one man by the name of King Satyavrata, whom this spirit of corruption failed to touch. He was almost as pure and spiritually powerful as Brahma, the Creator. While he was possessed of uncommon physical beauty, he was engaged in spiritual austerities and meditations in a holy forest on the top of the Himalayan mountains for many hundred years. One day, while he was sitting in contemplation on the bank of the river Chirani, a little fish leaped out of the water into his hands. He threw it back into the river, but the fish, to his surprise, spoke and begged the king to protect him from a large fish coming to devour him. Satyavrata, out of compassion, took the fish into his hands, again went home and placed it in a water pot. He tended him as his own offspring. The fish gradually grew so big that he had to be taken to a large pond, but after a few years the pond could no more hold the fish, so large had it become. The king, wondering at this unprecedented growth, suspected the fish to be Vishnu himself. The fish begged Satyavrata to put him into the holy Ganges, which he did by his yoga power. In time, however, the fish growing still larger, he had to be taken to the ocean. The king exhibited his yoga power again by carrying that huge fish to the ocean. As soon as he was thrown into the sea, the phenomenal fish smiled and thus addressed the king: "O thou kind one, thou hast saved and protected me in every way, but I will leave nothing undone to return this kindness. Now listen, the time has come for one of the great events of the world. The destruction of the earth is at hand. On the 7th day from this, the earth shall be swallowed up by the waters, from which thou canst not be saved except through me. A large ark shall come to thee, into which thou must get, with the 7 rishis, illuminated beings, of the Great Bear, who shall help and bear you company. Take thou also all kinds of seeds of all trees, plants, shrubs, and creepers, and also of all animals and creeping things on this boat, and wait for me. I will soon appear there, bedecked with horns. Do not doubt my words, but do as I tell thee." The strange fish then disappeared as Satyavrata said. So shall it be. He then did just as the fish had told him. When the ark came, he went aboard with the 7 rishis of the Great Bear and seeds and animals, and waited in anxious contemplation of the divine fish, which soon appeared as he had promised, bedecked with horns and high as a hillock. He made salutation to him, and tied the ark to his horns with a strong heavy rope. Whereupon the fish pulled the ark with great speed, and began to play upon the bosom of the ocean. Then the ocean heaved with huge waves, and the waters roared. It all looked as if the ocean was performing a wild dance. The ark was then tossed and whirled about with great force, and soon not a trace of land or sign of any direction was visible. Earth and sky seemed one vast expanse of water, under which all men and beasts and birds and vegetation were drowned and destroyed. The fish and the ark of Satyavrata, with the 7 rishis and the seeds and animals, alone existed. The divine fish drew and preserved the ark for many years on the surface of the deep. Long time after, when the water subsided and the highest peak of the Himalayas made itself visible, the fish drew the ark to it, and said in a pleasant voice, addressing the rishis, "O ye illumined ones, bind the boat for a while to this mountain peak," which the rishis did. In commemoration of this event, this peak of the Himalayas is still called the boat-binding peak. When the ark was safely tied, the fish said again to the rishis, "I'm Brahma, Brahma, the Creator. I have taken the form of the fish to save you all from the flood. Now this Satyavrata will be known as Vaivaswata Manu. He will, by my grace and power of his yoga, create all mobile and immobile beings of the earth, gods and asuras and men." So saying, the fish vanished. Vaivaswata Manu, who is also called Shradadeva, then sat in meditation, and in time, by his yoga power, created all the beings and creatures of the earth and celestial planes, as he was bidden to do. This is the shortest sketch of a very long account of the deluge in the Hindu books. The word Manu has been distorted into the word Noah in the Old Testament. In the distorted version of the deluge in the Holy Bible, this principal factor of the preservation of Noah and his ark, the divine fish, has not been mentioned out of ignorance of the detailed facts of the cataclysm. This ignorance is excusable, judging from the fact of the remoteness of the time when the last flood occurred. What the Bible estimates as 6,000 years, the Hindu books put down at more than 4 million, when Manu, Noah, was afloat on the waters of the universal inundation. The divine fish is an incarnation of Vishnu, who is worshipped and prayed to in that form even now in India. When God himself in fish form was guide and protector of Manu, there was no need of birds being sent out to reconnoiter as to the reappearance of land. It was the fish that first espied the highest peak of the Himalayas, visible above the waters, and drew the ark to it, and asked Noah and the 7 rishis to bind that boat to that peak. That peak is still called the boat-binding peak, the Sanskrit word being Nur Bandhan peak. The Bible calls it the Ararat, and they are now trying to locate it in Syria and many other places. Even a common-sense view of the matter ought to decide it in favor of the Himalayas, which are ever known as the highest mountains. That the first subsidence of the waters should first uncover a Himalayan peak is only natural to suppose. With the appointment of a new Manu are also appointed some highly spiritual souls as God, as well as the 7 rishis, illuminated beings, who govern the 7 stars of the Great Bear in the places of the gods, and rishis of the past Alam-Wantara, whose terms of office extend through the duration of 1 Manvantara, the cyclic period between 2 deluges. As every civilized country on the face of the earth is governed by a king and ministers and officers according to systematic laws and regulations, the 3 spheres Bur, Buba, Swar are likewise ruled by a king, ministers, and officers. The government of the British dominions may be taken as some sort of example to illustrate the divine administration. If we take England as the Swar sphere, Ireland as the Buba sphere, India and Canada may stand for the Bur or earth sphere. Manu, governor of the 3 spheres, can be likened to the King of England, though, unlike English king, he is invested with supreme power. Indra is his prime minister. The 7 rishis of the Great Bear may be called his independent cabinet ministers and advisors, but superior to him in wisdom and intelligence. The gods may be compared to members of parliament. secretaries of India and the colonies, and departmental administrators. The sons of Manu act like governor-generals of India and Canada, etc. At the beginning of a kalpa cycle, which is measured by 1,000 divine cycles, or a little over 14 manvantars, the Manus, rishis, and gods of all the 14 manvantars are selected beforehand. We are now living in the 7th manvantar. Shraddha Deva, called also by Aswata, is our Manu. The saints Kasyapa, Atre, Vasistha, Viswamitra, Gautama, Yama, Dagni, and Bharadwaja are the 7 rishis. Purandar is the present Indra. The Manus, the rishis, the Indras are all named for the coming 7 manvantars of the present kalpa in the Shastras. The prevalent belief among Western Orientalists is that Manu was a man who was born a few hundred years ago and died a natural death after writing his law institutes for the Hindus. A more erroneous idea could not exist from the Hindu point of view. Manu, being the spiritual administrator of the 3 worlds, has to live all through his term of office, which extends through 71 divine cycles, of which we are living in the 28th. Every Manu incarnates himself as a rishi towards the end of every golden age, and compiles his law and institutes for the benefit of humanity, while the 7 rishis incarnate among men at the end of each Kali Yuga to reveal the truths of the Vedas, which are forgotten and lost before that time. End of section 11. Sections 12, 13, and 14 of Sree Krishna, the Lord of Love, by Baba Premanand Bharati. Section 12. The Kalpa Cycle. When the golden, silver, copper, and iron ages, forming the divine cycle, have revolved for 1,000 times, they complete a still larger cycle than the manvantara, called the kalpa. As each manvantara is wound up with a deluge, each kalpa brings about a still greater disastrous event, that of the destruction of the lower 3 spheres of the universe, the Bur, Bhuba, and Swar. The description given of this great cyclic event in the Puranas as well as in the Mahabharata, especially by the immortal Markandeya, who has seen it many times, are simply appalling to the imagination of puny man. As I have already said, it is only the excessive accumulation of human sins, Tama life, that causes these natural catastrophes. The sum of sins which causes the kalpa dissolution is many times greater than that which is the cause of the flood. Human sins, however, are the immediate cause. The real or latent cause is to be found in the operations of the cardinal attributes of nature. Sattva and Raja are absolutely subdued by Tama, which then, growing more and more intense, bursts into a flame out of the friction of its own forces. This conflagration first manifests itself through etheric matter in the shape of 7 suns suddenly appearing in the heavens, and with their combined heat burning down the 3 spheres into ashes. This is followed by the appearance of strange clouds, which then burst and deluge the ash-turned earth. The ash, in process of time, is absorbed by the water. Then the air, turned into violent winds, absorbs the water. And then, when the air has been absorbed by ether, Akash, the destruction of the 3 spheres is completed. The immortal Markandeya described this pralaya, dissolution, 5,000 years ago to King Yudhisthira in the presence of Krishna and the assembled sages in the Kamrak forest. The following is a summary of his statement. O King, at the end, the Kali Yuga, previous to this pralaya, when the earthly days of all beings have come to an end, no rains will fall on earth for many successive years, in consequence of which all beings on earth will die, owing to unbearable heat and hunger caused by drought and famine. Then will appear simultaneously in the heavens 7 suns which will draw all the waters from all seas and rivers, whether dry or wet. Whatever grass or wood there is on earth will be reduced to tinder. Then will spring up the fire called Samvartak, which, aided by the wind, will attack the sun-absorbed earth, and piercing its surface will burn all there is in its bowels. Indeed, by this wind-helped Samvartak fire, all created beings, from the gods to creeping things, and all that now exists in the 3 worlds, will be destroyed and transformed into one huge heap of ashes. Then will appear in the firmament wonderful-looking, lightning-bedecked clouds, arrayed as garlanded rows of elephants. These clouds are some of them of the color of the blue lotus, some of the color of the kumud flower, some of the color of the golden heart of the lotus, some yellow, some green, some speckled gray, like the color of the crow's egg, some colored like lotus leaves, some are light brown, others look like large cities, others like hordes of elephants, others like the color of eye cosmetics, others shaped like crocodiles. These mysterious-looking, deep-sounding rain clouds, sent by God, spreading themselves over the sky, will send down rains in a continuous stream, like watery pillars descending from above, inundating all the ash-heaped mountains and valleys, and extinguish the fearful Samvartak fire. O King of the Pandus, thus, after these rains have fallen continuously for 12 years, the waters of the seas will rise in a flood and cover the earth, at which the still solid cohesiveness of her mountains giving way, the earth will sink to the bottom of the sea. Then the clouds, driven by the powerful winds in all directions, will suddenly disappear. Then he of the lotus abode and lotus born, the primeval god Brahma, drinking in the winds and the air, will fall into sleep at the close of his day. The lower 3 spheres, Bur, Bhuba, and Swar, are thus dissolved, and there is nothing in their place but one vast expanse of water. The upper 4 spheres, Mehar, Jhana, Tapa, and Satya, or Brahma, remain intact. The dwellers of the Mahar Loka, however, unable to bear the heat of the Samvartak fire during the earth's destruction, leave it and go up to the Jhana to live there during the duration of the pralaya. Now the question may be asked why these 4 upper heavens are not destroyed, and how can there be an ocean of water when the water element is destroyed along with the other elements? The answer is very interesting and instructive. There are 2 kinds or states of these 5 elements: ether, air, fire, water, earth. One may be called pure and the other mixed. The pure state of an element means wholly unmixed by even the least touch or tinge of the other 4 elements. A mixed element is made up of half part of one element, mixed with 1/8 part of each of the other 4 elements. The Bur, Bhuba, and Swar are made of these 5 mixed elements, which being destroyed by this Kalpa Pralaya, the 3 spheres are necessarily destroyed too. The upper 4 spheres are made of the unmixed elements, and hence they survive the Kalpa dissolution of the mixed elements. It is needless to say that dwellers of these upper realms are possessed of a physical body made of these 5 pure elements, and in the highest realms the dwellers have no physical bodies at all, and therefore no elements in their make-up. The bodies of some of them are formed of the 5 finest essences of the elements, sound, touch, form, taste, and smell, and of others the highest beings in the Brahma Loka of nothing but consciousness and ego and ensouled mind. The water of the watery expanse into which the lower 3 spheres are reduced by the Kalpapalaya is this unmixed pure water, which is invisible to our ordinary physical eye. The world is indebted to the immortal Markandeya for a description of what remains after this Kalpa dissolution. Blessed then with the finest and purest element body, he alone hovers over this vast watery expanse. His experiences are recorded in that history of the universe, the Mahabharata, of which here are a few details. Said Markandeya, O king, in this time of the Kalpapalaya, when all gods, asuras, elements, demons, men, animals, trees, and the firmament, etc., all the mobile and immobile beings and objects will be dissolved into one vast ocean, I alone will hover over that endless expanse of water and become sad-hearted on viewing this general destruction. After floating on it for a very long period of time, I will feel extremely exhausted. Then shortly after, a huge tree in the midst of that one ocean will attract my eye. O king, resting on the spreading boughs of that tree, I will see, seated on a couch of glory, a lotus-eyed boy with a face radiant like the light of the full moon. Instantly on seeing him, I shall be extremely astonished and will say within myself, how wonderful, everything has been destroyed. How then is this boy resting here? O great king, although I am blessed with the knowledge of the past, present, and future, I shall fail to know who that child may be. Then the lotus-eyed boy will thus speak to me in the sweetest voice, O Markandeya, I know thee, thou art become very weary and wishing for rest. Therefore do thou enter my body, and live there as long as thou mayest desire. I have been very pleased with thee, O king. On hearing these words of the boy, I will be filled with the spirit of indifference to my manhood and long life, at which suddenly that boy will open his mouth, and I will then enter into that mouth through some divine means. O great king, through his mouth I shall enter his belly, and to my astonishment shall see within him this whole earth of many kingdoms and cities, rivers, mountains, seas, the blue heavens bedecked with the sun and the moon, and the many forests. There I shall find Brahmins engaged in various religious ceremonies, the Kshatriyas, in ruling to the satisfaction of all other castes, the Vaishyas in their usual vocation of agriculture, and the Sudras in rendering loving sacrifices to the Brahmins. Lions and tigers and all the gods, angels, and serial beings are living peacefully in their respective spheres. In fact, all that existed before, I shall find existing within the belly of that great soul. O king, thus having seen the whole world within that boy, I will travel for many thousand years, like one in a dream, within that world, and in trying to find out its limit, will rush in all directions, but will not succeed in doing so. Then disappointment will turn my thoughts to that beautiful boy again, and with all the concentrated force in my body, mind, and speech, I will then ask for his protection and grace. At this I will be carried by a violent wind, as it were, through his mouth out of his body, and I will find him still sitting under that tree. The boy will then ask me with delighted heart and smiling face, O my good Rishi Markandeya, thou didst become very tired floating on these waters for such a long time. Have you now been well refreshed by living within my body? Then I will behold my soul freed from all bondage by the illumination which will enter me with the boy's words, and placing his crimson feet on my head, I will address him thus with folded hands and humility. How lucky I am! Today I have beheld the lotus-eyed God of gods, the soul of all things. O God, I have become very curious to know thee in this thy wonderful Maya illusion. Entering thy belly through thy mouth, I have seen the whole world existing there. O Lord, it was through thy grace that I did not lose my memory, and it is through thy will that I have now come out of thy body. O lotus-eyed, I have become very desirous to know thee. Why art thou resting here in the form of a boy, after having devoured the whole world? How is it that this whole world is now dwelling in thy body? How much longer wilt thou rest here, O Lord of gods? These subjects are great and unthinkable, and so I beg to hear from thee their detailed explanations. The God of the gods, after consoling me on the last occasion, began to answer my questions. He said, O Brahman, even the gods have failed to know the mysteries of my creation. I will tell thee of it only to please thee. O Rishi, thy wonderful devotion to thy father and to me, and to spiritual celibacy, have won thee this grace. I have appeared before thy vision. In time past I called water by the term Nar. This Nar is ever my seat, hence I am called Narayan. I am the first cause. I am eternal, inexhaustible, the creator and destroyer of all that exists. I am all wealth, I am death, I am Shiva. Fire is in my mouth, the earth is in my feet, the sun is my two eyes, the celestial regions are my head, the sky and the cardinal points are my two ears, space and eternity are my body, the winds my mind. All sacred ceremonies are performed to please me. All the Vedas come out of and enter into me. The peace-loving, mind-disciplined, inquiring, souls mystery-knowing, Brahmins contemplate and worship me alone. I am the fire called Samvartak. I am the Samvartak winds, and it is I who am the 7 suns that rise and shine in Palaya. The stars that thou seest now in the firmament are the pores of my body. The sky is my raiment. The sea is my seat and abode. It is I who have divided them as they are. Men are born, are overwhelmed by my Maya, and become enterprising through my law, never through their own desire. Those Brahmins who thoroughly study the Vedas, perform many spiritual sacrifices, bring peace to their souls, and vanquish anger. It is they who attain to me. Those persons who are addicted to bad actions, are swayed by greed, are misers, crooked-minded, and void of soul culture, can never reach me. The paths of yoga are as easy for pure souls to tread as they are uncertain to the wicked and the foolish. Whenever religion suffers from revolution and vice triumphs over virtue, I create myself and walk the earth and set things right. Whenever are born on the earth the selfish and envious asuras and demons so powerful that even the gods cannot destroy them, I, in the form of man, take birth in the family of pious men and bring peace to the world again by subduing them. I am white-complexioned in the Satya Yuga, yellow in the Treta, red in the Dwapar, and dark in the Kali. At the end of each great cycle it is I who destroy everything. I am the 3 paths, the soul of the universe, giver of all happiness, superior to all, all-pervading, the endless and the all-powerful. At the last Kali Yuga of each Kalpa, I spread my illusion upon all beings and enter into my trance state, when old Brahma, transformed into a child, goes to sleep and keeps sleeping. I rest here on the waters until he is awakened. Now go thou about on the waters in restful spirit until that time when I alone will create again earth and sky and light, air and water, and all bodies. So saying, O king, that wonderful being vanished from my view. Then by and by this world was created again. Thus in the last Kalpa, Palaya, did I witness this wonderful event. The lotus-eyed deity I then saw. You brothers have now established blood relations with him, this Krishna. It is through his grace that I have obtained uninterrupted memory, become so long-lived and endowed with the boon of dying at my will. This Krishna who is now sitting before us all, this Krishna present here who is born in the line of the Vrishnis, is just now merely playing on his earth, But it is he, this Krishna, who is the ancient person, the Lord, the unthinkable soul, the Creator, the Destroyer, the Eternal, and the Master of all. I have been able to remember all these facts only through the inspiration of his presence here. He is the mother and father of all beings. Do you all take his refuge. Krishna has been called Narayan here by Markandeya, because Narayan, the fourth form manifestation of Krishna in the unfoldment of creation, is generally known as the supreme deity, Krishna. Narayan, as I have said before, this is Aniruddha, out of whose navel springs the seed bud lotus, with Brahma, the operating creator of the details creation. Section 13. Natural dissolution. What is popularly known as universal destruction is termed in the Hindu scriptures prakritic pratisanchar, or natural retrogression, which means natural dissolution. This marks the close of the greatest cycle of time. It is the end of time, the end of creation. It is the Mahapralaya. It involves the annihilation of the universe, in one sense, because after its occurrence none of the principles except the ultimate exists. In one sense, I say advisedly, for although the manifest universe becomes non-existent, its latent spiritual impressions forming its germ are carried by the three cardinal attributes into the ultimate principle, love, Krishna, and preserved unconsciously, even during their rest in Krishna in a state of equilibrium. It is out of this mystic ideation that in the event of the in-equilibrium of the attributes, a fresh creation springs into existence. There is no such thing as destruction in the law of nature. Nothing is destroyed totally. All forms of destruction are but phases of transmutation, from gross manifestation into fine, from fine into finer, from finer into finest, from finest into mystic ideation, which belongs to the realm of absolute spirituality. The Hindu doctrine in regard to the process of creation is the unfoldment of the 23 principles from the reflection of the one, the manifestation into many, and the diverse of the mystic energy of the one unchangeable absolute. This mystic energy unrolls its many and diverse phases and forces in creation, and incessantly throughout its duration. Prakritic means natural from prakriti, nature. Pratisanchar is prati and sanchar. Prati means backward, and sanchar means the act of moving, motion. The whole word therefore means moving backward. Prakritic pratisanchar therefore is the moving backward of the unfolded principles of existence, nature, into its one source, out of which they originally spring. This backward motion of variety into unity is caused by the extreme action of intense tama, from which the following natural reaction puts the forces of the three cardinal attributes into equilibrium. This equilibrium is the unmanifest, avyakta, unexpressed state of nature, and the inequilibrium brings about the manifest state, the gross form of which is the universe. This action of natural dissolution has also its reaction. It reacts into a fresh creation. The symptoms which manifest themselves previous to the occurrence of this universal destruction are almost the same as those before the Kalpa Pralaya. Only the degeneration of human society develops worse phases, which are followed by intense heat, owing to the suspension of rains for years and years together, resulting in the death of all moving and breathing beings. Then appear in the heavens 12 suns instead of 7, as in the Kalpa Pralaya, which give birth to the Samvartak fire. The fire is followed by the appearance of the Samvartak clouds, which deluge the earth with continuous rains for years. The deluge is followed by the winds, etc. But the main difference lies in the absolutely destructive power of these elemental agents. When the suns and the fire have done their work, the black surface of the earth looks like the back of a tortoise. Then the water in which it is submerged absorbs the very attribute of earth, smell, along with its substance, which then becomes absolutely non-existent and transformed into water. The water is then absorbed by fire, heat with its attribute, taste, so that water becomes absolutely non-existent and is turned into fire. The volume of fire is then so increased that it burns the suns themselves, so that all the heavens, filled with all-pervading flames, burn on until everything in them is destroyed. Then the air devours the fire with its attribute form, so that there remains nothing visible to the eye. The winds then move about with all their force in the akas. Then akas ether absorbs the air with its attribute touch, so that nothing remains which can be felt. Then akas itself becomes unmanifest, the universal mind having absorbed its attribute sound, which originally sprang from it to create akas ether. This is called the dissolution of the gross form of the universe. The dissolution of the fine, subtle form begins with the moon, the presiding deity of the mind, absorbing the mind with its attribute, the power of willing and non-willing, which power, with all its associations, is then centered in the moon. After a long time, the mind centralized in the moon brings about the poise in its vibratory volition, the cause of material desires. This will control results in the moon-centered mind being absorbed by its original belief in the oneness of nature and Brahm, divine essence. The belief in this unity, ego, is then absorbed by universal consciousness, and universal consciousness, with its attribute of the power of decision, is absorbed by absolute being, one of the three attributes of Para-Brahm. Then wisdom, another of the three attributes, also called intelligence or truth, absorbs this absolute being. Then that all impregnated wisdom enters the unmanifest soul, absolute love, Krishna. Section 14. Modern scientific testimony. A recent discovery of modern science has not only thrown the clearest light upon this Hindu doctrine of the unity and composition of the universe, but has fully proved its correctness. This is the first indirect investigation of Western material science into the realm of the subjective side of creation. The author of this discovery, by strange irony of fate, is a Hindu, though educated and trained in scientific knowledge in England under English teachers of science. He is now a scientific celebrity among Western scientific celebrities of the day, and if the work of his tested discovery be rightly estimated, he ought to be classed with the highest of them all. His name is Professor Jagadesh Chandra Bose, Doctor of Science, Professor of Science in the Calcutta University. Professor Bose's discovery, now embodied in book form and entitled Response in the Living and the Non-Living, marks a new epoch in the advancement of modern science. It has been accepted by all scientific authorities after the professor had demonstrated it by experiments before a large number of scientific people in London, and notably by Lord Kelvin. Armed with the demonstrated facts of this discovery, Professor Bose maintains that the true test of the existence of life in any form of matter is its sensitiveness to external stimulus. According to this test, he proves conclusively that no essential difference exists between animals and metals or vegetables. He has shown by scientific experiments that a bar of iron is not only as irritable and sensitive as a human body, but that it can be killed or poisoned in the same way as a human body can be killed or poisoned. According to his discovery, life pervades every object and part of nature, and only some of these parts or objects can be said to be in a dead state, which means they can be deprived of their sensitiveness to external stimulus. If any part of our body is pinched, the nerve which connects that part with the brain running all along sends an electric current to the brain, vibrating under the pinch. The brain alone feels the pain inflicted upon any part of our body, says modern science, and it is proved by the fact that no pain is felt by us if our brain is deadened by chloroform. The galvanometer is a well-known and very delicate scientific instrument for detecting the presence of electric currents. It has a needle on a pivot, and the faintest electric current will cause a deflection of this needle. If at any intervening part of the electric current-bearing nerve in the human body the galvanometer be attached and the end of the nerve pinched or otherwise irritated, then immediately the needle of the galvanometer will deflect, thus showing that the irritation of the nerve causes a current like that of electricity to be sent along it. This fact is now very well known to scientists, and Professor Bose's investigations are based upon this well-known scientific fact. With a view to ascertaining whether or not matter, which has hitherto been known as non-living, could be proved so under the test of the galvanometer, the professor attached the instrument to bars of different metals with startling contrary results. The professor found that all metals show visible signs of sensitiveness when twisted or tapped. The greater the irritation, the greater the visible signs of sensitiveness. Even every single peculiarity in the irritability of animal matter is exactly reproduced in the case of metal. As for instance, when the sensitiveness of a muscle or a nerve of an animal wears off after time, under repeated irritation, it begins to show signs of fatigue, the deflection of the needle of the galvanometer becoming more and more feeble. The professor found that metals would betray exactly the same signs of fatigue under repeated irritation. Again, after a short rest, the signs of fatigue were found to disappear in animal muscle and in metal alike, their sensitiveness being fully restored. This last fact is known to many of us who constantly use a razor and find it losing its keen edge and growing duller and duller, despite vigorous stropping and spontaneously recovering its original keenness by being laid aside for a few days. Professor Bose's process of registering the deflections of the needle of the galvanometer is this. By a mechanical device, the point of the needle is photographed on paper, which is moved along at a constant rate, the needle's point tracing out a series of zigzag lines on the paper. When the needle is oscillated by an electric current, the width of the zigzags corresponds to the amount of the deflection of the needle, therefore the strength of the electric current. If there be no current and consequently no deflection of the needle, its point will remain stationary and merely trace a straight line on the moving paper. This book of Professor Bose's Response in the Living and the Non-Living is full of still more wonderful revelations. He has found and shown to the satisfaction of European scientists through experiments that metals do not only go to sleep, but can be poisoned and killed like human beings and animals. Like an unused animal muscle showing signs of sluggishness and appearing to be in a kind of torpor, then gradually seeming to waken up under irritation and finally returning to full activity, Professor Bose proves that metals behave in exactly the same way in process of gradation. He also proves that the effects of extreme cold and extreme heat produce exactly similar conditions in both animals and metals. But men or animals can be drugged and made drunk. Can metals likewise be drugged and made drunk? Yes, says Professor Bose, and he proves it absolutely. He proves that metals show the same increase of irritability under the influence of stimulants and narcotics as the human body. Moreover, even as different animals are affected differently by the same dose of a stimulant, so also are different metals. Under the influence of carbonate of sodium, irritability of platinum is increased threefold, while the irritability of tin is less. Still more significant is the action of anesthetics and narcotics. Under their action, the sensitiveness of metals can be reduced to any desired degree, exactly as is the case of human beings. A more striking parallel between animal matter and metals is established by Professor Bose. The action of some narcotics on the human frame is known to be paradoxical under certain conditions, while a large dose of opium, for instance, decreases the sensitiveness of the human body. A very minute dose has exactly the opposite effect, that is to say, acts as a stimulant. This anomaly has been found by Professor Bose to have a parallel in metals, tin being found to show that its sensitiveness is increased half as much again by being treated with a minute dose of potash, 3 parts in 100, but the sensitiveness begins to decrease when the dose is increased. Now the question suggests itself that if metals are as much alive as animals, then they must also be as liable to die as animals. Professor Bose has found this to be a fact too. Metals not only die, but they can be poisoned and revived, and poisoned and killed. In order to find out these facts, Professor Bose took a piece of metal which showed full vigor of sensitiveness, and so was considered healthy, and treated it with a moderate dose of oxalic acid, which is a powerful poison. The needle of the galvanometer instantly indicated a spasmodic flutter, the sensitiveness of the metal more and more feeble, till it seemed almost to die away. At this stage, a powerful antidote being applied, slowly and gradually the sensitiveness began to revive, and in time became as active as when the metal was not poisoned. The treatment of another piece of healthy metal with a strong dose of the same poison resulted in violent spasms, with rapid enfeeblement of sensitiveness, which soon vanished altogether. After a proper interval, the antidote was tried in vain. The piece of metal was killed forever. The results of experiments with different metals and different poisons were the same. But all poisons not being alike in their action upon animal matter, the same is true of their action on metal, absolutely and undoubtedly. In some cases, however, after all traces of poison had been removed by the counteracting influence of stimulating acids, the poisoned metal was eventually reanimated, which meant that the metal was not really killed, but was merely in a state of suspended animation. The most striking feature of the discovery in this connection is that the very poison which kills both animal and metal is itself endowed with life, which shows itself by indications of irritability and sensitiveness, and which can itself be killed. Here is another significant point in regard to the operation of poison on both an animal and a metal. In the case of an animal, the operation is twofold. First, the actual death process lasting from a few minutes to several hours. Secondly, the purely nervous effect which manifests itself in the form of spasms, paralysis, or other symptoms, and which is developed much sooner, sometimes instantaneously. Professor Bose has discovered the same phenomenon in metal. Under the effect of some powerful poisons, there was instantaneous spasm shooting through the metal long before the corrosive action of the acid could penetrate beyond the surface. Professor Bose has proved in his book that all these phenomena, with every single variation, exist as much in the vegetable kingdom as in the animal and mineral. Indeed, the three kingdoms of matter, the animal, the vegetable, and the mineral, are, says the professor, but one in essence, and the physiological distinction between so-called organic and inorganic matter, of which man and metal are but types, is based upon a false and unscientific assumption. Professor Bose dedicates his book to his countrymen, the Hindus, because, he says, his discovery is a discovery made millions of years ago by the Hindu sages, who proclaimed the unity of the universe in essence and construction, as well as in the laws that govern it. End of section 14. Sections 15, 16, 17, and 18 of Sree Krishna, the Lord of Love, by Baba Premanand Bharati. Section 15. Science upholds Shastras. Now let us consider the main points of this great epoch-making scientific discovery by the light of the truths of nature and the laws of matter, discovered countless ages ago by the illuminated sages of India and handed down through the corridors of time. Every discovery of modern science has tended to establish the principles of Hindu religion and philosophy by furnishing practical testimony to what were so long considered as their mystic teachings. But this discovery of Professor Bose's is an unexpected stumble of a purely objective method of investigation upon the truths and laws of the subjective realm. The evidence which Professor Bose's experiments afford is, of course, indirect, but this indirect evidence is startlingly direct in its pointed and unmistakable suggestions. It is therefore most opportune at the present moment, when the human mind, the world over, is striving, impelled by a natural hunger, to get at the facts back of the physical shroud of the universe. The Hindu sages say that the universe is one whole huge being, of which the high heavens are the head, the sun and the moon, the eyes, space, the body, and the earth, the feet. Every inch, nay, every point of this universe body is alive, as a healthy human body. The composing principles of this body are 24, as I have already explained. These 24 principles are therefore present in every atom of it, in every speck of earth, the last principle in creation. This speck or molecule of earth has, however, no opening for any of its composing principles, whereas vegetable and animal life forms have many of these passages of their composing principles more or less open. As a tortoise puts forth its body out of its shell, and again draws that body into it, so, out of love, the 23 principles are projected and drawn in the fullness of time back into its bosom again. This reaction or journey of the universe back to its source is called universal destruction, or dissolution, or disintegration. This universal dissolution takes place when the three cardinal attributes of creation, out of which all the composing principles have sprung, fall into equilibrium, in other words, become equal in power or tension. This loss of tensity or equipoise in the power of the cardinal attributes, viz. Sattva, illumination, raja, activity or motion, and tama, obscuration, results in the loss of their individuality and their transformation into pure illumination. By pure illumination is meant unmixed illumination, that is to say, absolute illumination, having no tendency or trace in it of being disturbed into obscuration. In short, sattva, raja, and tama are each of them mixed with the other two, its own quality being predominant in it. Their inequality of power brings them forth into and sustains their being. The moment this power becomes equal and they lose their existence, the absolute illumination, coexistent with absolute love and absolute being, out of which they sprung, alone remains. This equipoise of the cardinal cosmic attributes takes place at intervals of time, the dimension of which staggers the human mind to imagine. But while the return journey of the universe as a whole takes place once in an indefinitely long period of time, the molecules of earth, as soon as they are created, have a tendency to go back to their original source. But the molecules' journey backward to love is made by a very circuitous path. That path leads through the process of opening one by one the passages of its composing principles. By passages is meant channels of communication and sympathy with the main laws and vibrations of the working of the universe. The first step the molecule takes in this return journey is by opening the passage of one principle, the sense of feeling, and becoming a blade of grass. A blade of grass has only one sense opened, the sense of touch, by which it draws juice from the earth for its sustenance. After being reborn thousands of times as a blade of grass, it draws the magnetism from the different life forms in nature, which helps it to develop into a shrub, and then after thousands of shrub lives, it develops into a plant, and then into tree life, in which it puts forth flowers and fruits, and finally drawing in more and more magnetism and vibrations from the animal world, it develops into an animal itself. At first it is but an animalcule, and then a worm. As a worm it has opened more passages, the passage of tasting the palate, the passage of gripping with the mouth, the passage of moving the feet, the passages of excreting and generating, the passage of seeing, the eye, the passage of smelling, the passage of hearing, etc. Through thousands of rebirths in each animal form, it is promoted into higher and higher animal forms, in which more and more passages of its composing principles are opened. The last forms of lower animals it takes are those of monkeys and apes, the forms just before developing into human form. In these ape forms of life it opens all principles except for viz. Mind, ego, intellect, and love. However intelligent a monkey or dog or any other animal may be or seem to be, the mind principle is not yet open in it. All its actions are prompted by instinct, which is the natural impulse of the indirect influence of the mind, as well as of automatic memory of past experiences in this and previous existences, the impressions of which are in their very blood. With the opening of the mind principle begins the human form. It may be the most savage man, but it is human. He can think, is self-conscious, and acts with reasoned decision, however crude or erroneous, because with the opening of the mind there are simultaneously opened the ego and the intellect, they being almost on principle in three. After these explanations of the composition, construction, and transformation of matter, let us go back to unopened matter in order to explain the mysteries of Professor Bose's discoveries by the aid of the galvanometer. The professor has discovered that the application of this delicate instrument reveals the fact that matter, which has hitherto been considered non-living, is very much alive indeed, as fully alive as living animals are, because they respond to external stimulus as fully as any living being. According to Hindu definition and idea of construction and composition of matter, it is only natural that this should be so. To the Hindu sage this is not at all a wonder. love, consciousness, ego, mind, the 10 senses, the 5 fine essences, and the 5 gross forms of matter, called elements, are as much present in minerals, which are but formations of earth, as in animals. A lump of earth or a piece of metal or a vegetable cannot give visible direct response to external stimulus because they have no openings, open physical organs through which to manifest it. If you can by any means feel the vibrations caused by such stimulus within them, then only can you find the proof of the uniform composition and construction of all forms of matter in this one whole living universe. The galvanometer serves this purpose, and hence the Hindu idea stands today as a demonstrated fact. Let us analyze the tests and proofs of the galvanometer a little more closely and understand them according to the Hindu doctrine of the construction and organization of what is called organic or inorganic matter. The Hindu doctrine does not recognize the nerve or the brain as any of the principles which compose what is called the living body. The nerve is but a mere physical vehicle of the sensation of the mind, which includes the ego and the intellect, the part of universal consciousness in individual souls, and the brain is the physical center of these physical channels of the mind's sensation and experiences. The mind feels the sensation of the external stimulus through its channels, the 5 cognizing senses, and the mind's sensations are carried through the nerves to the brain. This is in regard to animal life, which has brains and nerves formed fully or partially. The vegetables and minerals have neither brains nor nerves. How then do they show the same irritation as animals do to external stimulus, as shown by the galvanometer? The answer is simple, because they have the psychic vehicles, the 5 cognizing senses, by which to convey the sensation of the external stimulus to the mind, and therefore they need no physical brain or nerve. Only having no physical openings, they cannot manifest the effect of those sensations outside themselves as animals do, and only an instrument like the galvanometer is able to detect the sensations and indicate them by the deflection of its needle. Mineral and vegetable matter, having all the 24 principles in them, have the mind and the senses too, only they are in a shut-up, undeveloped state, and perform their undeveloped, crude functions like an unconscious mechanism. It is through the senses that sensations are perceived, and had not the senses been present within a piece of metal or a vegetable, there would be no sensation in it, and therefore the galvanometer would have been useless in its application and results, because there being no sensation, there would be no deflection of the needle. Professor Bose's experiments conclusively prove not only the unity, but the uniform composition and construction of the whole universe, that all its composing principles are present everywhere, that in some phases they are in a latent and in others in manifest state. The tests of the galvanometer also prove that what is true of the whole universe is true of a particle of earth, that the whole universe is one whole living mass, like a single living being, and that every molecule of its composition is a universe in embryo, because every molecule is instinct with all the forces and properties of the 24 principles, which are the materials as well as the attributes of the cosmos. Section 16. Physical and astral bodies. It is the ignorance of the knowledge of the constitution of the universal and human bodies that forms one of the chief obstacles of a correct study of the laws operating behind external nature. It is the general belief of modern humanity that the human body is made up of flesh and blood alone. This is true so far as the physical body is concerned, but there is another body within us finer than the physical, which is the real body, and of which the physical body is the outer encasement. This real body is called the astral body. The whole human body is like a clock, of which the physical covering is its case, and the astral body its works. As the mechanical part of a clock is the real clock, and its case with its dial and hands forms its covering by which it indicates its working, so the astral body is the mechanical part of the human body, and the physical is its case through which it indicates its operations. Though far from perfect, the analogy is very suggestive. For instance, the mechanical part of the clock cannot serve its purpose without the aid of the case, dial, and hands. The astral body likewise cannot be of any use without the cooperation of the physical body. The mechanism of the astral body is composed of 18 principles, viz., consciousness, intellect, ego, mind, the 10 senses, the powers of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, speaking, holding, moving, excreting, and generating, and the 5 attributes of the elements, sound, touch, form, taste, and smell. These principles work through their counterpart organs of the physical body, which is composed of the 5 remaining principles, viz., the 5 elements, ether, air, fire, water, and earth. Now let us see how the physical body is composed of the 5 elements, the vigor of our father and the blood of our mother, of which our physical body is made, are our formations of assimilated food. Every kind of foodstuff, vegetable, or animal is but condensed form of earth's juice. Earth juice is the earth. Now earth is composed only of its 5 attributes, sound, touch, form, taste, and smell, the first 4 of which compose water, the first 3 compose fire, the first 2 air, and the first sound is the attribute of ether, akos. Therefore, the other 4 elements are present in earth on account of their respective attributes being contained in it. Our physical body, therefore, being made of formations of earth, is composed of the 5 elements. The material of the physical body is supplied by our parents, and the astral body we supply ourselves. The astral body is our permanent body. It puts on new flesh garments from time to time. When it slips into a new flesh garment, it is called birth. When it slips out of it, it is called death. But really, the astral body lives on forever and ever, and never ceases to exist unless we find the means and take measures to destroy it. The extinction, the astral body, is brought about by the mind's absolute dissociation from the bondage and influence of matter and material ideas, and absorption into the divine essence, mukti. The earth and the visible sky form the physical body of the universe, and the upper 6 spheres form its astral body, which includes still subtler bodies. This means that both the universal and the human bodies are constructed on the same principle. Both are formed of 7 bodies, encased like a sheath within a sheath. These are called the food-made physical body, the vital body, the mental or astral body, the psychic body, the wisdom or causal body, the blissful body, and the soul body. Section 17. Karma. The universe is one whole manifestation of cause and effect. All nature is manifested and materialized, forces of action and reaction. The doctrine of karma is based upon the natural law by which action produces reaction, the law of cause and effect. It holds that every action is the cause of every reaction, as well as the effect of the action which is its producing cause. The doctrine of reincarnation specifies the different physical forms in which groups of accumulated causes of reaction manifest themselves in nature. The laws of karma are the regulated blendings of the subtle forces of the finer principles of nature which, operating from within, shape these outer physical forms. Karma begins with the creation of the universe, and creation begins with the loss of equilibrium of the 3 cardinal attributes while dwelling in a quiescent state in absolute love, Krishna. This inequilibrium develops the germ of the past universe which the attributes hold within them, and manifests itself as a new universe, a new creation. The word karma is derived from the Sanskrit root kri, to act. Karma means action. Action means the motion of the operating forces of nature. The karma of the past creations, stored up as ideation within the even forces of the attributes, works itself out in the form and phases of a new creation. Every succeeding creation, therefore, is the reactive result of all previous creations. This reaction of the accumulated action potencies of the past creation produces the uniform dimensions and the principal features of the cycles, so that the history of every cycle, from the smallest to the largest, repeats itself in its chief points in naturally regulated succession. As in the great universe, so in its epitome, man, the microcosm, is ruled by the same laws as the macrocosm, the laws of cause and effect, of action and reaction. Man is the conscious embodiment of the blended forces of his past actions, actions of previous conscious embodiments, born of the forces of still more previous embodiments. Action proceeds from thought. Thought is the source and spring of action. No action is possible without its producing cause, thought, which is a phase of the mind's volition. All our thoughts are impressed on the mind the moment they form themselves in condensed pictures. The more powerful a thought, the deeper the impression on the mind. Weak, undeveloped thoughts make superficial impressions and are liable to wear off. The impression of a powerful thought is likewise rubbed off by the force of a strong counter-thought. An angry thought, for instance, prompts us to do a bad action, but before it is reduced to action, our reason sometimes intervenes, argues against it, convinces us of its error, which induces repentance. The stronger the counter-thought of repentance, the more quickly and effectively it rubs off the impression. But if the thought is reduced to action, its impression is deep and enduring, and requires the aid of absolutely sincere burning repentance to destroy that impression. These thought impressions on the mind are called seeds of karma. They are exactly like seeds of trees in their potencies and operations. As a seed of a tree, when planted in the soil, germinates, grows, flowers, and bears fruit, so does a karma impression germinate, grow, flower, and bear fruit. As the germ of a seed in process of development produces the events called sprouting, putting forth leaves and branches, flowering and fruiting, lo, a man's mental thought impressions of previous lives in almost self-same way sprout, put forth leaves and branches, flower and fruit in the shape of events inside and outside of him. The thought impressions are reflected upon the aura. Aura is a Sanskrit word, its transliterated form being ara from ar, which means the spoke of a wheel. Aura means full of spoke-like shoots of radiance from any center. This center of our aura is our mind. Aura, therefore, is the radiance of the mind, which permeates and envelops our body in an oval shape and generally extends 1 cubit outside of our body. The aura and reflections of these thought impressions on the aura are visible only to the spiritual and psychical sight. The illuminated saints and yogis who have developed this sight not only see this aura, but also the reflections of the thought impressions, which they can read and interpret as we read and interpret words. These reflections are called the characters of the mind, the hidden pictures, Chitra Gupta, of human conduct, which reveal the past, present, and future history of a human soul to those who can decipher them. From the aura, these characters are reflected again upon the ether, which receives the impression and keeps the record of each external and internal event in nature. The ether is the storehouse of the records of all human and natural happenings and vibrations, and it is from this storehouse of all mental records that true clairvoyance draws its inspired messages and revelations. A fully developed yogi can learn the details of an event which occurred 10,000 years ago, or of any time, and can tell of any present or future occurrence in any part of the world by concentrating upon the ether, the all-knowing ether. Thus, the records of the causes of human actions are kept in triplicate, so that there is no escape from the potencies of their merits and demerits, unless the main records, those on the mind, are melted away by the fire of absolute all-absorbing spiritual consciousness. Actions, karma, are of two kinds, white and black. White karma springs from the sattvic state of mind, and black karma from its tasmasic state. The color of sattva, illumination, is white. The color of tama, darkness, is black. Hence karma is white or black. Raja is the attribute of activity, the working principle, the motive power of action. Without the aid of Raja, no action is possible. When Raja works with dominant sattva, the result is white karma. When it works with dominant tama, the result is black karma. The white and black actions are commonly called good and bad. What is a good action? It is an action whose ultimate reaction produces harmony and happiness and illumines the mind. What is a bad action? It is an action which, however enjoyable or otherwise while it lasts, produces a reaction of inharmony, pain, and misery, causing darkness of the mind. In respect to the law, according to which they come to be worked out in their turn, the karma seeds, white and black, are of three classes: sanchit, prarabdha, and kriyaman, or agami. Sanchit means stored up. Prarabdha means karma, the reaction of which has begun, or that which is working now. Kriyaman means karma seeds originating out of the prarabdha karma now being worked out, but which will form the seeds of future agami actions. Sanchit karma includes the seeds of all the actions of past existences stored up as impressions on the mind. Out of this storehouse of karma seeds, that white or black which is the most powerful asserts itself to be worked out first, drawing to itself by the law of affinity. Karma seeds of minor power, but of a nature similar to its own. This most powerful karma seed, lumped up with small karma seeds of similar character, forms the prarabdha karma which is in the process of being worked out. And in its process of working, the fresh thought impressions which the mind is registering are called kriyaman. Karma being born, also called agami, future karma, karma seeds, which, after being deposited in the storehouse, will come to be worked out in their turn in future, either as main or minor prarabdha, according to their potency. This is the law of working of human karma, the inexorable law which shapes our life and destiny, which fills existence with joy or sorrow. Karma is unending unless we learn the mysterious law which works it and grasp the still more mysterious law behind that karmic law, and by its practice destroy its roots and prevent its present and future actions within us. I will speak of this law and of its ways of practice later on. We often see a man who has lived a good, pure, and harmonious life, suddenly through circumstances or bad associations, changed into a bad man. He becomes worse in habits and conduct and dies in that degraded mental state. Similarly, we find someone very bad up to a certain period of life. He suddenly turns good and before death develops into an angelic character. This law of karma is behind this change of character. Good prarabdha influences one into good life and actions while it is working. But if some black karma seed is the most powerful of all karma seeds in the mind's storehouse, after the good prarabdha has been worked out, it asserts itself to be worked out next, and, lumped up with the minor seeds, forms his prarabdha, which changes the whole complexion of his character and conduct. The case of a bad man becoming good is subject to the same law. A white prarabdha, owing to its predominant power, succeeds a bad one. The liability of alternate succession of bad and good karma producing the actions of human beings is expressed in the metaphoric saying that the action of karma in man is like a revolving wheel. As a seed of a tree takes time to bear fruit, grow old, and die, so a karma seed takes time to develop and die. As the periodical putting forth of leaves, flowers, and fruits are the events in the life of a tree, so the experiences of a man's life represent the development of his prarabdha karma seed. The time a karma seed takes to work itself out is measured by the duration of the sustaining power of its potentialities. One prarabdha karma may embrace 2 or 3 or more births, if it is very powerful, or may end in the middle of one birth, if it be not so powerful. An extraordinarily powerful karma may extend for a long time, covering many births. Suicide, for instance, the thought which leads to suicide makes the deepest impression on the mind, far deeper, in fact, than even the thought which commits murder. Why? Because we love our own life more than anybody else's, or than anything else on earth. It, therefore, requires an extraordinarily powerful thought to overpower that innate, intense love of our life and incite us to destroy it. The thought back of this self-murder, therefore, makes the deepest impression on our mind, and thus becomes the most powerful karma seed of all karma seeds. This being so, it asserts itself to form the prarabdha every time it is worked out, to the exclusion of all other karma seeds for a long series of births, in every one of which that soul commits suicide, sometimes, as it is often found, without any apparent reason. It is divine mercy alone that saves a suicide from committing suicide in every birth ever afterwards. Hence suicide is the greatest sin, greater than even murder. To the average Western mind, this karma philosophy strikes as intolerably pessimistic on account of the inexorableness of its laws. There is, however, no help for it. These laws rule us all, whether we believe in it or not. They are no man-created laws. They are laws which operate throughout nature, as much within a white man as within a brown, yellow, or black man, of all stations of life, of all grades of consciousness. Yet it need not strike anybody who has found the easy and rosy path out of the woods of karma as pessimistic at all. But he or she must ever keep to that path and never stray out of it from sheer willfulness, or else there certainly is no escape out of the labyrinth of karma. Section 18. Reincarnation. Reincarnation, as I have said, is the physical form in which groups of accumulated causes, karma, of reaction, manifest themselves in nature. Reincarnation means rebirth. Rebirth means to be born again in flesh after death. In order, therefore, to know what is rebirth, we must know what is death. To know what is death, we must know what is life. Let us see what life really is. Human life is conscious mentality encased in flesh. To be briefer, human life may be summed up in one word: consciousness. Life of lower animals is negative consciousness, while human life is positive consciousness. Human consciousness is subject to 3 states: the waking state, the dream state, and the dreamless sleep state. In the waking state, all our inner and outer senses work. The inner senses are the intellect, the ego, and the mind. The outer senses are the 5 cognizing and the 5 working senses. These senses are fully active during our waking state. So long as the mind thinks, the intellect decides, the ego is self-conscious, the eye sees, the ear hears, etc. They are acting. An activity, raja, brings about the reaction of weariness, tama. In other words, the senses become tired out, owing to incessant work and need rest. It is the state of weariness of the senses that makes us feel exhausted and seek rest. But the senses cannot have full rest as long as we are in a waking state, for their activity never ceases while we are awake. Here, nature's law steps in and draws a veil between the senses and their objects, the veil of tama, born out of the excessive work of raja. We fall asleep. But in the first stage of sleep, our senses still sustain their activity, though in a lesser degree than in the waking state, owing to their still cognizing reflections of the objects and scenes impressed on our mind while we are awake. This is called the dream state of consciousness. Dreams are of 3 kinds. The ordinary dream is made up of the blended reflections of impressions of scenes and thoughts, ill natural or fantastic shapes. The second kind of dream is a clear, unmixed reflection of the mind's impressions of some of our experiences in a previous birth. The third kind of dream is a reflection cast upon our pure consciousness of coming events from their karmic impressions on the ether or on our own aura. The ordinary dreams belong to the dream state. The other 2 classes of dreams are experiences during the dreamless state of sleep, generally in the morning just before awaking. The dreams in the first stage of our sleep keep our senses still employed and the mind active on that account, for the activity of the mind is generated by the operations of the senses with their objects. Hence neither the tired mind nor the tired senses derive the complete rest they need, until gradually the veil of tama grows dense and shuts out even the mental reflections of objects from their view. This stops the operations of the senses, which then are absorbed by the mind, whose offsprings and agents they are, for the senses cannot exist when they are deprived of their function of cognition. The same thing occurs with the mind, for its activity, caused and sustained by the activity of the senses, is the only reason for its separate existence. With the loss of its function, therefore, the mind loses this separate existence and is absorbed by the ego. The ego is in the same way absorbed by consciousness, for the ego is dependent on the mind, which sustains its existence of self-consciousness, and then absolute consciousness with the passive germs of the ego, mind, and the senses merged in it, is absorbed in its turn by the soul and dwells in its realm until the senses have rested sufficiently. In the depth of this dreamless sleep state of our consciousness, tama gives place to the reaction of sattva, which is very pure during this state. This dreamless sleep may be called a negative trance state. When we awake through development of the raja attribute, we feel not only thoroughly refreshed, but also in a state of mental harmony, a happy mood of mind. We also feel that we were, during that dead sleep, in a state of utter oblivion of everything. We feel we forgot then even our own existence, feel that we were not conscious even of our own self, that we were in an absolutely happy state, happy with happiness itself. We know of this condition when we awake from it by inference from the happy state of our mental mood induced by the abstract impression of it upon our consciousness, which was present then in its pure state. The cause of the refreshment and new strength of our body and senses is this dip in the essence of the soul, the source of all energy. The physicians try to put their patients into this deep sleep in serious cases of illness, knowing by experience that deep sleep is a quicker and more powerful restorer of health than any medicine, but they do not know where lies the balm of sound sleep. The activity of raja brings about the awakening from this state by causing the unfoldment of the unfolded ego, mind, and senses, which resume their operations with external and internal objects as before. The difference between death and sleep lies here. After sleep we resume the functions of our senses, but death is caused by the confusion of our mind on account of the senses not being able to resume their functions, owing to the disorder of the physical counterparts of the sense organs through disease. Disease belongs to the physical body, and the senses with the mind and ego belong to the astral body which we are. The pains we feel are caused by our identifying ourselves with our physical encasement. If we keep the fact constantly alive in our mind that our physical body is the earthly home of our soul, which is the center of our astral self, we will not only not feel physical pain, but prevent or do away with such pain even in the physical body. To know ourselves as nothing but our physical body is the densest, narrowest, and most mischievous ignorance. We often find proofs of this separateness of the physical and mental bodies from acts which present themselves in our daily life. We fail to cognize the experiences of our body, or even of our senses, when our mind absent from them and absorbed in some other direction. It is the mind that feels pain, pleasure, not the body, neither the senses. The physician, through the action of drugs, causes the attribute of Tama to assert itself and cover the mind's perception with its dark veil, so that the patient may not feel the pain of a serious operation on the body, while we feel no pleasure in eating or drinking if our mind is away from them. The yogi, who has by practice developed unbroken consciousness of the separateness of the mental and physical body, not only enjoys, when the consciousness is absolute, immunity from physical diseases and mishaps, but also does not feel the throes of death when he leaves his worn-out or diseased physical tenement. But the generality of mortals, who cannot think of themselves as anything else but their physical bodies, owing to ignorance, suffer from all physical diseases. When these physical diseases put the physical counterparts of sense organs into disorder, it confuses the mind when it finds that its channels of outward communication, the senses, can no longer work through them. In that confusion, it loses its balance, and is strongly swayed by the desire to again see and hear and feel and taste, etc. But finding it impossible to do so in the present body any more, it tries to find some vehicle through which it can resume its functions. The pain of the worst stage of the physical disease distracts it more and more, so that it thinks it would be more comfortable in any other body than its present one. In confusion, this central force of the astral body enters with that body into the volume of air which fills the physical body, thinking it will gain relief from the unbearable pain. And no sooner the astral body, which is very subtle and finer than the air, enters into it than it passes out, thus air encased through the mouth, causing the death of the physical body. This is the common process of death. Some astral bodies enter the air body unconsciously, if the mind has been benumbed by pain or covered by the influence of excessive Tama. But this is certain of every ordinary soul, that it goes out of the body encased in air. The thought predominant in this supreme moment of human life decides the destination of the human soul encased in the astral body when it leaves its physical home. If we think of nothing but of Krishna at this moment, we go to Krishna and live in his abode, Golaka, the abode of absolute love. If we think of Christ, we go to Christ in his Father's kingdom of heaven. If we are filled with the conception of nirvana, extinction of all individuality, we go to nirvana. If we desire for higher life above the earth, we go to the higher spheres. But if our earthly attachment, having their influence on our thoughts at that moment, fill us with regret for being taken away from them, or make us desire for earthly life, we return to earth life again, but not necessarily to a joyful or comfortable life. A life of worldly joy and comfort is due to good karma and self-denial in some previous existence. A life of sorrow and hardship is due to bad karma. The earthbound soul, on leaving the physical body, feels overcome by the shock of its final trouble with and severance from that physical body, and remains in an inert state for a time. When it recovers from that shock, it finds that it has been transferred to a worse state. Although the air body in which it encased is not diseased, it has, however, no openings for its senses to perform their respective functions. It finds it cannot see or hear or smell or touch or taste anything, and yet the desires for these objects of the senses are as strong as when it was in the physical body. This makes it weep for the loss of its dear physical body, and it hovers about in space, sad and restless. It has no stomach, yet is filled with mental hunger and thirst, which grow intense because it has no means of satisfying them, indeed finding this astral life to be of greater torment. The unhappy earthbound soul longs to have a flesh covering again, to be reborn, and flies hither and thither blindly because of the want of physical organs, and some day gains this object. It enters through the vigor, Sanskrit, virga, virgya, force power, of a man into a woman's womb. This causes conception. No conception can take place without a disembodied spirit entering the womb. Vigor mixed with the mother's blood supplies the physical body, which is mere dead matter, without the vivifying astral soul. It is only when an astral soul enters it that the womb closes and conception takes place. The incoming soul then feels itself confined within its scope and cannot go out of it by its own effort or will. The selection of the vigor and the womb for the astral soul is made principally according to the subtle law of individual karma, and secondarily according to the law of affinity. The mental characteristics of the parents must be similar to those of the soul to draw it to them. As for its physical body, it may favor in appearance its mother or its father more or less according as their individuality and image are stamped on the vigor and the blood through the state of extreme mental concentration induced at the time. If the incoming soul possesses far stronger individuality than those of the father and the mother, it asserts this upon its body, and the child looks like neither the father nor the mother. He looks like himself, a form and appearance born of the imagination of its own strong individuality. This direct rebirth from hovering in the astral body in the astral plane for some time is not true in the case of every disembodied soul. There are souls which after death may go at once to heaven, Swarga, celestial regions, or to purgatory, the nether regions. According to the Hindu scriptures, heaven, Swarga, is not the abode of God, but the abode of the gods. The swar sphere where the gods, the governors of the elements and attributes of nature, dwell. It is the prarabdha karma of the soul that determines its translation after death to heaven or purgatory. The joys of heaven are reserved as a reward for good karma, and yet these heavenly joys are but finest forms of material happiness, enjoyed by merit of good actions performed in earth life for the sake of just such recompense. These heaven dwellers mentally enjoy all these exquisite pleasures of the senses at their will, as well as the company of celestial beings as long as the term of their merit lasts. At the expiration of the term they come down to earth to be reborn again. These heavenly blessings are therefore but transitory. Intensely wicked actions in the same manner are punished by a term of suffering, tortures, and purgatory, at the expiration of which the purged souls may go straight to heaven, if good prarabdha karma succeeds their expiatory sufferings, or be reborn again on earth. The tendency of the pleasure-seeking materialistic modern mind is to disbelieve the existence of any such place of torture as purgatory. They think that heaven and purgatory exist only on earth within man's mind. This is true, and yet it is not. If anybody develops high spirituality, he or she can taste higher, finer, and more lasting joys than even celestial pleasures. For such there is neither heaven nor purgatory, for intense spirituality burns down all seeds of karma. As to enduring the tortures of purgatory here on earth through repentance, that is true too. But if the spirit of repentance is not absolute, it fails to fully purge away the sin, so that such sinful souls have to go to the nether regions for complete cleansing. The Hindu books do not believe in such a thing as eternal hell or punishment, because it is absurd, unjust, and unscientific according to the laws of nature. The governor of Naraka, purgatory, one of the gods' presiding deity of Dharmaraj, the regions of his rule are situated within the bowels of the earth. Human houses of correction, prisons, tend more to corrupt than to correct, because those in charge of them are not imbued with a perfect spirit of sympathy, justice, and mercy. In the divine houses of correction, purgatory, perfect justice blends with mercy and sympathy, and the governor thereof is the embodiment of these three attributes. He has to deal with his prisoners according to their own records of their misdeeds, reflected on the aura, a true copy of which is kept in the books of ether, from which his recording angel transcribes items credited to each individual soul. For the pious, spiritually developed soul, however, there is no purgatory. As I have said, it lives and breathes on a plane which is outside of the three lower planes of selfish actions and their reactions, outside of the jurisdiction even of the gods. To his ensouled mind, the word purgatory or heaven has no meaning whatever. He loves spirituality for its own dear sake, and feels itself safe from all evil in the embrace of its protecting arms. Into the vigor or the blood of such a spiritual soul no wicked astral spirit can enter. Its pure aura repels such spirits and admits only kindred spirits seeking rebirth, drawn to it by karma and affinity. Much suffering is the lot of the ordinary soul while growing in the womb, on account of its cramped consciousness and the narrow space in which it is confined. After the 6th month it has a wonderful experience. The veil shrouding its past existence is suddenly lifted, and the memories of all its past births rush across his mind. It even witnesses the scenes of thousands of its previous existences, and realizes the reason of the pain and sorrow suffered during all these existences, the reason of its having been attached to material objects and having disregarded the development of its spiritual self, its having been unmindful of its duty to its maker and its fellow man. This realization crushes its mind with contrition, and it weeps and prays to God to forgive it, and promises to live a life of devotion to him in the future. This goes on for 3 months together until it is born, when at the touch of the earthly atmosphere all those memories vanish, and it is once more drowned in oblivion. It is more from the pain of this shock that it cries out at the time of birth. End of section 18.